The flight attendant's eyes widened as Jasmine's father stood up, his military uniform now visible beneath his jacket. The white woman who seconds ago had been screaming at his daughter suddenly fell silent, her face draining of color. Everyone in first class froze, waiting for what would happen next. Before I dive into this shocking story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in standing up against discrimination. Now let's get into this incredible story that shows how quickly justice can be served when you mess with the wrong family. 16-year-old Jasmine Washington was beyond excited. After months of research, late nights, and dedication to her environmental science project, she had earned a spot at the prestigious National Youth Science Competition in Washington, D.C. The competition represented more than just academic recognition. It was her chance to showcase research on environmental inequities affecting predominantly Black neighborhoods in her hometown of Fayetteville, North Carolina. The morning of their departure, Jasmine awoke to her father's gentle knock on her bedroom door. Colonel Terrence Washington had raised Jasmine alone since her mother Denise succumbed to breast cancer when Jasmine was only 8 years old. Despite his demanding military career at Fort Bragg, including 3 overseas deployments, Colonel Washington never missed an important moment in his daughter's life. "You ready for the big day, Jazz?" he asked, leaning against her doorframe. His 6'2" frame nearly filled the entrance, his posture naturally straight from decades in the military. Jasmine nodded nervously as she zipped her suitcase closed. "I think so, Dad. Just hope I don't mess up during the presentation." Colonel Washington crossed the room and placed his hands on his daughter's shoulders. "Jasmine Alexandria Washington, you've prepared for months. Your research is solid, your delivery is confident, and your passion shines through. You've got this." His unwavering faith in her abilities always centered Jasmine. Though her father commanded hundreds of soldiers, he still made her feel like his top priority. She knew how rare it was for him to take leave during such a critical time, at the base, making this trip together even more special. "Thanks, Dad," she said, pulling her suitcase off the bed. "We should probably get going if we don't want to miss our flight." "Actually," Colonel Washington said, with a hint of mischief in his eyes, "there's been a slight change of plans." Jasmine's heart sank. Was he being called away again? Had the trip been canceled? Instead, Colonel Washington pulled 2 boarding passes from his pocket and handed them to her. "Check the seat assignments." Jasmine's eyes widened. "First class, Dad, you didn't..." Her father's face broke into a rare, wide grin. "You've earned it, Jazz. Your acceptance to this competition is a big deal, and I wanted to make the journey special." Jasmine had never flown first class before. Their family lived comfortably on her father's military salary, but Colonel Washington was practical with finances, saving diligently for her college fund rather than splurging on luxuries. 2 hours later, they arrived at Raleigh-Durham International Airport. As they navigated security and made their way to the gate, Jasmine couldn't help but notice her father's occasional wince. "Your knee bothering you again?" she asked. Colonel Washington shrugged dismissively. "Just the old war souvenir, acting up. Nothing to worry about." The injury from his second deployment often flared up during weather changes, though he rarely complained. Boarding began, and Jasmine felt a flutter of nervousness as they were called forward with the first group. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Sophia, welcomed them warmly. "First time in first class?" Sophia asked, noting Jasmine's wide-eyed expression as they settled into the spacious seats. "Is it that obvious?" Jasmine laughed. "Only in the best way," Sophia replied with a genuine smile. "Let me know if you need anything during the flight." Jasmine couldn't help but notice she was one of only 3 Black passengers in the first-class cabin, and certainly the youngest. She straightened her posture instinctively, aware of how often people made assumptions about whether she belonged in certain spaces. Shortly after takeoff, Colonel Washington unbuckled his seatbelt. "I'm going to stretch my leg a bit and use the restroom. Will you be okay for a few minutes?" "Dad, I'm 16, not 6, Jasmine said with an affectionate eye roll. Her father chuckled and stood carefully, navigating the aisle toward the front lavatory. He had changed from his uniform into civilian clothes for the flight, dark jeans and a button-down shirt with a light jacket, though his military bearing was unmistakable in his posture and movements. Alone in her seat, Jasmine pulled out her notebook and began reviewing her presentation notes, slipping on her noise-canceling headphones to help her concentrate. She became so engrossed in her work that she barely noticed the commotion of a late boarding passenger taking the seat across the aisle from her. Karen Whitfield was having an absolutely terrible day. As the vice president of marketing for a national retail chain, she was accustomed to things going her way. Today was proving to be a frustrating exception. Her connecting flight from Chicago had been delayed, causing her to sprint through the terminal in her designer heels. The airline had initially informed her that she might miss her flight to DC entirely, but a last-minute gate change had allowed her to board as the final passenger. And to top it all off, her checked luggage containing her presentation materials for tomorrow's executive meeting might not arrive until morning. Breathless and irritated, Karen dropped into her first-class seat across from Jasmine, immediately demanding a pre-flight cocktail from Sophia, who politely informed her that they needed to wait until reaching cruising altitude. "Fine," Karen snapped, tossing her designer handbag onto the empty seat beside her. She ran a hand through her expertly highlighted blonde bob and took in her surroundings, her gaze landing on Jasmine. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. In her mind, first class had standards, and the young black girl in jeans and a university sweatshirt didn't fit her mental image of who belonged there. Karen prided herself on being progressive. She had even led her company's diversity initiative last quarter, but unconscious biases ran deep. "Excuse me," Karen said loudly, trying to get Jasmine's attention despite her headphones. When Jasmine didn't immediately respond, Karen reached across the aisle and tapped her arm. Startled, Jasmine removed her headphones. "Yes, can I help you?" "Are you sure you're in the right section?" Karen asked with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Economy boarding is usually announced later." Jasmine blinked momentarily, taken aback by the woman's assumption. "I'm in the right seat, thank you," she replied calmly, returning to her notes. Karen wasn't satisfied. "It's just that first class is usually for business travelers. This isn't student seating." Jasmine took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully as her father had taught her. "My boarding pass says 3A, which is this seat. So yes, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Karen pursed her lips but said nothing more as Sophia began the beverage service. When the flight attendant handed Jasmine an orange juice, Karen's expression soured further. As Jasmine took a sip of her juice, the plane hit a pocket of turbulence. A few drops spilled onto her tray table, with one or two possibly landing near the edge of Karen's space, though nowhere near the woman herself or her belongings. Karen reacted as if she'd been doused. "Oh my God. Can you be more careful? These shoes are Louboutins." Jasmine immediately grabbed a napkin. "I'm sorry, it was just the turbulence." "I don't think any got on your shoes, but I'll clean it up," Sophia Karen called out sharply, ignoring Jasmine's apology. "This girl just spilled her drink all over my space. Can something be done about this?" Sophia approached with professionalism. "Let me help with that." She quickly wiped down the area with extra napkins, noting that the spill was minimal and contained to Jasmine's tray table. "There we go, all cleaned up." "This is unacceptable," Karen continued, her voice rising. "I paid thousands for this seat and I expect certain standards to be maintained." Several passengers glanced over, creating exactly the kind of scene Jasmine had hoped to avoid. She sat perfectly still, feeling the familiar weight of being judged, and found wanting in spaces not traditionally occupied by people who looked like her. "The standards of our first-class cabin are being maintained perfectly," Sophia replied with practiced diplomacy. "Is there anything else I can assist you with?" Karen's face flushed with frustration. "Yes, there is. I don't understand how the airline is letting just anyone into first class these days. There used to be certain expectations." The coded language wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. An older white gentleman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. A South Asian woman 2 rows ahead turned around briefly, making brief eye contact with Jasmine in silent solidarity before facing forward again. "I paid for this seat like everyone else," Jasmine said, quietly struggling to maintain her composure. "Did you?" Karen challenged. "Or did someone buy it for you? Or maybe you got upgraded by mistake?" Jasmine felt her chest tighten, but kept her voice steady. "I don't have to explain myself to you," Karen scoffed. "That's what I thought." Sophia returned with Karen's requested cocktail, which seemed to momentarily distract her. Jasmine put her headphones back on, trying to refocus on her notes while ignoring the knot forming in her stomach. She thought about texting her father, but didn't want to worry him over what she hoped would blow over. After all, this wasn't her first encounter with someone questioning her presence in a predominantly white space, and it probably wouldn't be her last. Instead, she took out her phone and pulled up a photo of her mother from 8 years ago. In it, Denise Washington was smiling broadly despite the visible effects of chemotherapy, her arm around a young Jasmine at a science fair. "Always take up the space you've earned," her mother had told her that day, after Jasmine expressed nervousness about presenting her project. "Never let anyone make you feel small." Strengthened by the memory, Jasmine straightened her shoulders and continued reviewing her notes, determined not to let Karen's behavior derail her focus or diminish her presence. 20 minutes into the flight, Karen had finished her cocktail and seemed increasingly fixated on Jasmine's presence. Each time Jasmine shifted in her seat or turned a page in her notebook, Karen's eyes darted in her direction with barely concealed disapproval. "Excuse me," Karen called out to Michael, the senior flight attendant who was passing through the cabin. "I have a concern about seating." Michael paused beside her seat. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "I believe there may have been a boarding pass mix-up," Karen said, gesturing toward Jasmine. "This young person is seated in first class, and I'm wondering if someone else was supposed to have this seat." Michael glanced at Jasmine, who was once again wearing her headphones. "All of our passengers are seated according to their assigned seats, ma'am. There's no mix-up." Karen lowered her voice, though not enough to prevent Jasmine from hearing. "Look, I fly first class every week. I know what type of passengers are typically seated here. Could you just check if perhaps there was an upgrade error?" Jasmine removed her headphones, tired of pretending not to hear. "My boarding pass is right here," she said, firmly holding up the document. "Seat 3A. First class. Assigned and paid for." Karen's face hardened. "I'm just asking for the flight attendant to verify. No need to get defensive unless you have something to hide." "I'm not hiding anything," Jasmine replied, her patience wearing thin. "I'm trying to prepare for an academic competition, and you keep interrupting me because you've decided I don't belong here." I never said that. Karen backpedaled, aware of how she might sound to others. "I'm just concerned about possible seating errors. It happens all the time." Michael intervened smoothly. "I can assure you all passengers are correctly seated. Now, is there anything else I can help you with?" Karen wasn't ready to back down. "Actually, yes. I'd like to see her boarding pass myself. As a frequent flyer, I know what to look for." "Ma'am, that's not appropriate," Michael said firmly. "We don't ask passengers to show their boarding passes to other passengers." Jasmine tucked her boarding pass into her notebook and turned slightly away from Karen, attempting to end the interaction. "Fine," Karen huffed. "But when someone who actually paid for this seat shows up looking for 3, don't be surprised." 2 rows ahead, Tyler Richards, a marketing director at a tech company, had been discreetly observing the interaction. Recognizing the situation unfolding, he quietly took out his phone and, angling it as if he were checking emails, began recording the exchange. Karen, growing increasingly frustrated at being dismissed, raised her voice again. "You know, when I was your age, I would have been taught to respect adults and answer their questions properly." Jasmine took a deep breath. "With all due respect, ma'am, I don't owe you an explanation about my seating assignment. I've answered politely, the flight attendant has confirmed I'm in the right seat, and now I'd like to return to my work." "Well, I never," Karen exclaimed, loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. "This is the problem with your generation. No respect, no manners, just entitlement." The irony of Karen's statement was not lost on several passengers who exchanged knowing glances. Sophia quickly approached, sensing the situation was escalating. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, though it was clear from her expression that she knew it wasn't. "No, everything is not all right," Karen said. "I'm trying to have a civil conversation with this girl about proper first-class etiquette, and she's being incredibly rude." "I haven't been rude," Jasmine defended herself. "I've answered her questions and asked to be left alone to work on my project." "See, that attitude is exactly what I'm talking about," Karen said to Sophia, as if they were co-conspirators. "In my day, young people knew their place." Jasmine tensed at the loaded phrase, but maintained her composure. She reached for her phone to text her father, only to realize the battery had died. She'd been so absorbed in reviewing her notes that she hadn't noticed the low battery warning. Karen interpreted Jasmine's movement as reaching for something in her bag. "What are you doing? What are you taking out?" "Nothing," Jasmine replied, showing her dead phone. "I was just going to text my dad, but my phone's dead." "Your dad," Karen repeated with air quotes. "Convenient that he's nowhere to be seen when your behavior is being questioned." Jasmine blinked in disbelief at the insinuation. "My father is on this flight. He's in the restroom." Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Of course he is. And I suppose he paid for this first-class ticket too, with what kind of money, I wonder?" The racist undertone hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. Tyler Richards continued recording discreetly, his jaw clenched in anger at what he was witnessing. Sophia intervened again. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and stop harassing other passengers." Harassing Karen gasped. "I'm simply concerned about maintaining standards on this flight. If asking legitimate questions is now considered harassment, then this airline has bigger problems than I thought." She then reached across the aisle toward Jasmine's tray table where her notebook lay open. "Let me see that boarding pass again." Jasmine quickly closed her notebook. "Please, don't touch my things." Karen's hand hovered in the air between them. "I have a right to verify." "You have no right to touch me or my belongings," Jasmine said firmly. Years of her father's lessons about standing her ground while remaining dignified echoing in her mind. The confrontation had now drawn the attention of everyone in first class. A middle-aged black businessman in the front row made eye contact with Jasmine and gave her a subtle nod of support and understanding. An elderly white woman nearby clutched her pearls, either in shock at Karen's behavior or Jasmine's resistance, it wasn't clear which. Jasmine tried to slow her racing heart, remembering similar situations she'd faced the time a store security guard followed her through an upscale boutique, the day her science teacher expressed surprise at her perfect test score, the country club pool attendant who asked to see her membership card 3 times in one afternoon, while her white friends swam unbothered. "Is there a problem here?" Michael had returned, his expression now more stern than professional. Before either could answer, Karen declared loudly, "I want this girl moved to another seat. She's disrupting my flight experience, and I refuse to sit near someone so confrontational and disrespectful." "I haven't done anything wrong," Jasmine stated calmly, though her hands trembled slightly. "She's been questioning my right to be here since she boarded." Michael looked between them clearly, trying to assess the situation objectively. "Let's all take a breath. We still have over an hour of flight time remaining, and we need to make it comfortable for everyone." "Exactly," Karen agreed, misinterpreting his diplomatic approach as support. "So please relocate her to a more appropriate section." Jasmine felt a chill run through her body. Would the flight attendant actually ask her to move to appease this woman? Would she be humiliated in front of the entire cabin despite having done nothing wrong? She wished her father would return. Where was he? The lavatory couldn't be that far away. The tension in the first-class cabin had become unbearable. Several passengers were now openly watching the confrontation between Karen and Jasmine. Michael, the senior flight attendant, stood in the aisle, attempting to de-escalate the situation, while Sophia hovered nearby, clearly concerned. "Ma'am," Michael addressed Karen in his most diplomatic voice. I understand you're uncomfortable, but I've checked the flight manifest. Everyone is in their assigned seat. Karen huffed dramatically. Well, your manifest is wrong. There's obviously been a mistake. She gestured toward Jasmine as if her very existence in first class was evidence enough. There's no mistake, Jasmine reiterated, struggling to maintain her composure. I have a valid ticket for this seat. Let me see it then, Karen demanded, extending her hand imperiously. Show me your boarding pass. Michael intervened. Ma'am, as I've explained, we don't require passengers to prove their seating assignments to other passengers. That's the airline's responsibility, and we've confirmed she's in the correct seat. Karen's face flushed with anger. Do you know who I am? I'm an executive at Meridian Marketing Group. I fly over 50,000 miles a year with this airline. I'm a Diamond Elite member. We appreciate your loyalty, Michael replied professionally, but our policies apply equally to all passengers. Karen's voice rose several decibels. I want to speak to the pilot. Now. The pilot is currently flying the aircraft, ma'am, Michael explained patiently. I'm the lead flight attendant for this cabin. I'd be happy to address any reasonable concerns. Reasonable, Karen scoffed. What's unreasonable is allowing this situation to continue. She lowered her voice to a theatrical whisper that was still perfectly audible. Look, I know you have diversity quotas to fill, but this is first class. Gasps erupted from several nearby passengers. Tyler Richards, still recording discreetly, shook his head in disbelief. The South Asian woman 2 rows ahead swiveled around completely now, no longer hiding her interest in the confrontation. Jasmine sat perfectly still, her face a careful mask, despite the hurricane of emotions within her. Every fiber of her being wanted to react to defend herself against this blatant racism, but she heard her father's voice in her head. Don't give them the satisfaction of losing your dignity. Your presence itself is resistance. That's completely inappropriate, Michael stated firmly to Karen, all pretense of customer service pleasantries vanishing from his tone. Inappropriate, Karen laughed bitterly. What's inappropriate is how she's behaving. She's been aggressive and threatening toward me this entire flight. Jasmine couldn't contain her shock at this blatant lie. What I haven't moved from my seat or said anything threatening. See how she's raising her voice at me, Karen said to Michael, twisting reality in real time. I feel unsafe. She keeps glaring at me. Who knows what she might do? The absurdity of a 16-year-old honor student being characterized as threatening might have been laughable in another context, but there was nothing funny about the very real danger of such accusations for a young black woman. I haven't threatened anyone, Jasmine said, her voice now shaking slightly, despite her efforts to appear calm. I've been sitting here trying to prepare for my science competition. Karen smirked condescendingly. Science competition, is that what they're calling it these days? Tyler Richards stood up from his seat. Excuse me, but I've been recording this entire interaction. This young lady has been nothing but polite, while being harassed continuously. I'd be happy to provide this video to the airline and, if necessary, to social media. Karen's eyes widened in alarm. You've been recording me without my permission. That's illegal. I'll sue you. Actually, Tyler replied calmly, airline cabins are public spaces with no expectation of privacy, especially during a disturbance that affects other passengers. Karen turned back to Jasmine, her expression darkening. This is your fault. You've turned everyone against me with your victim act. I'm not acting, Jasmine replied quietly. I'm just trying to exist in a space I paid to occupy. Something in Jasmine's calm dignity seemed to further infuriate Karen, who suddenly leaned across the aisle, invading Jasmine's personal space. You people always think you're entitled to special treatment. The cabin fell silent at the unmistakable racist comment. Michael stepped forward. Ma'am, that's enough. I need you to return to your seat immediately. But Karen wasn't finished. She reached out toward Jasmine's hair, which was styled in natural coils. Is this even real? I bet it's one of those fake hair things. Jasmine leaned away, horror and disbelief washing over her face. Do not touch me or my hair. Or what Karen challenged, her hand still outstretched. Are you threatening me again? Everyone heard it. I'm not threatening you, Jasmine replied firmly. I'm establishing a boundary. You do not have permission to touch me." Karen's face contorted with rage. "How dare you speak to me that way?" Her hand moved in a sudden arc toward Jasmine's face. Instinctively, Jasmine raised her arm to block the impending slap years of self-defense training with her father kicking in. She didn't counterattack or even push back, she simply protected herself. What do you think about Karen's behavior so far? Comment number 1 if you believe she crossed the line, or number 2 if you think Jasmine should have handled it differently. Like this video if you've ever witnessed discrimination in a public setting, and subscribe to support stories that highlight these important social issues. The confrontation has reached its boiling point, with Karen attempting to physically assault Jasmine. But where is Colonel Washington during all of this, and what will happen when he discovers what's been happening to his daughter? Will Karen face consequences for her actions, or will this be another instance where racism goes unchallenged? The turning point of this story is coming up next. What is happening here? The commanding voice cut through the cabin like a thunderclap. Every head turned toward the source. Colonel Terrence Washington stood in the aisle, his military bearing unmistakable despite his civilian clothes. During the commotion, he had slipped off his light jacket, revealing the upper portion of his army dress uniform beneath. The silver eagle insignia of a full colonel gleamed on his collar. Karen's hand froze mid-air. The color drained from her face as she registered both the uniform and the fury radiating from the imposing figure now approaching. Colonel Washington moved with controlled precision to Jasmine's side, his trained eyes quickly assessing the situation. "Are you okay, Jasmine?" he asked, never taking his gaze off Karen. "Yes, Dad," Jasmine replied, relief washing over her features. "This woman has been harassing me since you left. She just tried to hit me." Colonel Washington's expression hardened further, though his voice remained measured. "Ma'am, did you just attempt to strike my 16-year-old daughter?" Karen's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. "There's been a misunderstanding. Your daughter was being disruptive, and I was simply trying to get her attention." By swinging your hand at her face, Colonel Washington challenged, his tone glacial. Tyler Richards stood up again. "Sir, I've recorded most of this incident. This woman has been harassing your daughter with racist insinuations, demanded to see her boarding pass, and just now attempted to touch her hair before trying to slap her." Colonel Washington nodded gratefully to Tyler before turning back to Karen. "Ma'am, I am Colonel Terrence Washington, United States Army, currently stationed at Fort Bragg with the 18th Airborne Corps. I've spent the last 22 years defending this country, including 3 combat tours. I did not risk my life repeatedly so that my daughter could be assaulted on a commercial flight because of the color of her skin." The cabin had fallen completely silent. Even the ambient noise of the aircraft seemed to dim in the gravity of the moment. Karen's demeanor shifted instantly. "Colonel, I had no idea. Thank you for your service. There's clearly been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Colonel Washington interrupted firmly, "was your belief that my daughter was somehow undeserving of being in this cabin despite having a valid ticket. The only misunderstanding was your assumption that you had any right to question her presence or attempt to touch her without consent." Michael, who had stepped back when Colonel Washington arrived, now moved forward again. "Sir, I sincerely apologize for this situation. We should have intervened more decisively." "You did what you could," Sophia added, joining them. "I tried to redirect her several times, but she was persistent." "I understand," Colonel Washington acknowledged, "but now I need to know what actions will be taken to ensure my daughter's safety for the remainder of this flight." Karen attempted to regain control of the narrative. "This is ridiculous. I'm being ganged up on because of a simple misunderstanding. I'll be contacting your corporate headquarters about this treatment." "Please do," Colonel Washington replied evenly. "I'll be filing a formal complaint myself, including charges of attempted assault on a minor." Karen's face paled. "Assault? That's absurd. It wasn't like that at all." "I have it all recorded," Tyler reiterated, holding up his phone. "Including your comments about you people and questioning how they could afford first class." Several other passengers now spoke up, confirming they had witnessed Karen's behavior. The South Asian woman identified herself as Dr. Patel, a pediatric surgeon, and stated firmly that she had observed Karen's aggression from the beginning of the flight. Karen's bravado crumbled as she realized the united front against her.
This is unfair. I'm being singled out because I dared to question something suspicious.
The only suspicious behavior on this flight has been yours, ma'am, Colonel Washington stated. Turning to Michael, he continued, I respectfully request that this woman be moved to another section of the aircraft away from my daughter. Michael nodded. We were just discussing that option. There's an empty seat in the rear of economy class. Economy, Karen sputtered, horrified. I paid for first class. And you forfeited that privilege through your behavior, Michael replied firmly. The captain has been notified of the disturbance, and we have the authority to reassign seats for the safety and comfort of all passengers. Karen looked desperately around the cabin, searching for an ally, but found none. Even the elderly white woman who had seemed scandalized earlier now averted her eyes, unwilling to support such obvious misconduct. This is reverse discrimination, Karen declared, grasping at straws. Colonel Washington's expression remained impassive. No, ma'am. This is consequences. As Karen gathered her belongings, still protesting the injustice of her situation, Jasmine looked up at her father with gratitude. He had taught her to stand her ground with dignity, and she had done exactly that until he arrived. But she couldn't deny the relief she felt at his presence, at not having to face this battle alone anymore. Michael and Sophia escorted Karen toward the back of the plane, her indignant complaints fading as they moved through the aircraft. A spontaneous, quiet applause broke out among the first-class passengers, quickly dissipating as Colonel Washington took his seat beside Jasmine. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner, he said quietly. There was a medical situation with an elderly passenger in the lavatory area. I was helping the flight attendants. Of course you were, Jasmine said with a small smile, not surprised that her father had been assisting others even while unknowingly away from his own daughter's crisis. Tyler Richards approached their seats, introducing himself properly.
I wanted to let you know that I have the video if you need it for any complaint proceedings. What happened was completely unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Richards, Colonel Washington said, offering his hand. Your willingness to speak up means a great deal. As Tyler returned to his seat, Dr. Patel leaned over from her row. Your daughter handled herself with remarkable poise. You should be very proud. I am Colonel Washington, replied, glancing at Jasmine. Every single day, the remaining hour of the flight passed without incident. Karen remained in economy class, reportedly continuing to complain to anyone who would listen, though finding few sympathetic ears. Jasmine managed to refocus on her competition notes, drawing strength from the supportive environment that had emerged from the confrontation. As they began their descent into Washington, D.C., Colonel Washington placed a gentle hand over his daughters. Your mother would have been so proud of how you handled yourself today. Jasmine blinked back unexpected tears. I was just thinking about what she always told me. Take up the space you've earned, they said in unison, sharing a moment of connection that transcended the ugliness they had encountered. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, announcing their imminent arrival, but also adding an unusual note. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been informed that there will be airport security personnel meeting our flight upon arrival to Tree. Address an incident that occurred during our journey. We ask for your patience during deplaning, as they may need to speak with certain passengers. Jasmine and Colonel Washington exchanged glances. The day's challenges weren't quite over yet, but they would face whatever came next, together with dignity, resilience, and the unshakable bond between father and daughter. The aircraft touched down at Reagan National Airport with a gentle bump. As the plane taxied toward the gate, passengers began the usual routine of gathering belongings and checking phones for missed messages. But an unusual tension lingered in the cabin, the aftermath of the confrontation still palpable. Ladies and gentlemen, the pilot announced over the intercom, please remain seated until we reach the gate. As mentioned earlier, airport security personnel will be boarding before general deplaning begins. Whispers rippled through the cabin. Near the back of the plane, Karen's voice could be heard protesting loudly about the ridiculous overreaction to a minor disagreement. Sophia approached Jasmine and Colonel Washington. The captain would like to personally apologize to you both before you deplane. Also, the authorities may want statements from you regarding the incident. Colonel Washington nodded.
We understand. We'll cooperate fully.
Jasmine's phone had regained power thanks to the seat's charging port, and she found 17 text messages from her competition teammates wondering about her arrival time. The last thing she wanted was for this incident to overshadow the purpose of their trip, but she knew her father wouldn't let the assault attempt go unaddressed. As the aircraft door opened, 2 uniformed airport police officers and a plainclothes air marshal boarded. The air marshal approached the flight deck to confer with the captain, while the officer spoke briefly with Michael at the front of the cabin. After a moment, one officer moved through the plane toward economy class, presumably to speak with Karen. The other officer, accompanied by Michael, approached Jasmine and Colonel Washington.
Sir, miss, the officer said respectfully, I'm Officer Ramirez with Airport Police. We understand there was an incident during the flight involving an attempted assault.
We'd like to get your statements if you're willing.
Of course, Colonel Washington replied, his military background evident in his direct, cooperative manner.
Tyler Richards leaned forward from his seat. Officer, I have video documentation of much of the incident. I'd be happy to provide it as evidence.
Officer Ramirez looked surprised but nodded gratefully. That would be extremely helpful, sir.
Meanwhile, at the rear of the aircraft, Karen's indignant voice rose above the ambient noise.
This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? I'm calling my attorney.
The captain emerged from the cockpit, a tall man with silver hair and captain's stripes on his shoulders. He made his way directly to Jasmine and her father.
Colonel Washington, Miss Washington, he said with sincere regret in his voice, on behalf of the airline, I want to extend our deepest apologies for what you experienced today.
This is not the standard of service or safety we aim to provide.
Thank you, Captain, Colonel Washington replied. Most of your crew handled the situation as well as could be expected under the circumstances.
The captain nodded, then lowered his voice. I've been informed of the details, and I want you to know that we've made the decision to ban the passenger in question from our airline pending a full investigation. We have zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. Jasmine felt a complex mix of emotions. While she appreciated the airline taking the matter seriously, she was acutely aware that countless similar incidents occurred daily without cameras rolling or military officers present to command respect. How many people faced discrimination without such immediate consequences for the perpetrators? After providing their statements to Officer Ramirez, Jasmine and Colonel Washington were permitted to deplane first. As they walked through the jet bridge, Jasmine noticed her father wincing again. Dad, your knee is really bothering you, isn't it? You were in that bathroom area a long time. Colonel Washington sighed. The elderly passenger needed assistance, and standing in that confined space aggravated the old injury. It's nothing serious, just uncomfortable. We should get you some rest at the hotel before tomorrow, Jasmine insisted. You've done enough for one day. As they entered the terminal, they were surprised to find a small contingent of airline representatives waiting, including a woman who introduced herself as Regina Powell, the Regional Customer Service Director. Colonel and Miss Washington, she said, we've arranged for a private car to take you to your hotel. Again, we deeply regret the incident on board and want to ensure the remainder of your journey with us is as comfortable as possible. Behind them, a commotion erupted as Karen was escorted through the jet bridge by the second police officer, still protesting loudly. This is discrimination. I'm the victim here. I want all of your badge numbers. Several passengers had their phones out recording her behavior. In the age of social media, incidents like this rarely remained private. Will she be arrested? Jasmine asked quietly. Regina exchanged glances with Officer Ramirez. That depends on whether you want to press charges for the attempted assault, the officer explained. Currently, she's being detained for questioning and possible disorderly conduct charges related to disrupting the flight. Colonel Washington considered this carefully. What are your thoughts, Jasmine? This affected you directly.
Jasmine was taken aback by her father asking her opinion on such a serious matter, but she appreciated being treated as an adult. After a moment's reflection, she replied, "I think she should face consequences, but I'm more concerned about making it to my competition preparation session tonight." A measured response, her father nodded approvingly. "Officer, we will provide formal statements and cooperate fully with any investigation. We're not opposed to charges being filed, but we'd prefer to complete that process after my daughter's competition concludes in 3 days." "That's entirely reasonable," Officer Ramirez agreed. "We can take preliminary statements now and arrange for you to complete the formal process before your departure." As they waited for their luggage, Tyler Richards approached again, having shared his video evidence with the authorities. "I've uploaded the video to secure cloud storage and shared access with the officers," he explained. "But I wanted you to have it as well." He handed Colonel Washington a business card with login credentials written on the back. "Thank you for your allyship today," Colonel Washington said, sincerely shaking Tyler's hand. "Too often people witness such incidents and remain silent." Tyler shook his head. "I've seen it happen too many times. My wife is Black, and the stories she's told me about similar experiences." He trailed off. "It costs nothing to speak up when you witness injustice." News of the incident spread quickly. By the time they reached their hotel, Jasmine had received text messages from friends back home who had already seen clips of the confrontation on social media. Someone had recorded Karen being escorted through the terminal, and the video was rapidly accumulating views and outraged comments. In their hotel suite, Colonel Washington received a call from his commanding officer, who had somehow already heard about the incident. "Washington, are you and Jasmine all right? This sounds serious." "We're fine, sir," Colonel Washington assured him. Jasmine handled herself with extraordinary composure. "I'm extremely proud of her." After the call, Jasmine sat on the edge of her bed, the emotional weight of the day finally catching up with her. "Dad, do you think this will overshadow the competition? I don't want to be known as that girl from the plane instead of for my research." Colonel Washington sat beside her. "Jasmine, today you demonstrated the same courage and dignity in facing discrimination that you've shown in your research on environmental injustice. The two aren't separate, they're both expressions of your character and your commitment to justice." Jasmine nodded, finding comfort in her father's perspective. Still, as she prepared her materials for the next day's competition orientation, she couldn't help but worry about how the incident might affect her presentation and how she would be perceived by the judges and other competitors. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The airline had issued a public statement about a disturbing incident of misconduct on one of their flights and their zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. Though no names were mentioned, the statement made clear that the passenger responsible had been banned from future travel with the airline and its partners. For better or worse, the wheels of accountability had been set in motion. As Jasmine finally drifted off to sleep that night, she wondered how different the outcome might have been without her father's presence, without Tyler's recording, without the collective witness of the other passengers. How many similar incidents ended differently with the victims of discrimination, left without vindication or justice? The question haunted her dreams, intermingling with formulas and data points from her research on environmental justice, different manifestations of the same fundamental inequities she was committed to addressing in her own way. The next morning, Jasmine awoke to the gentle chime of her phone. Squinting through sleepy eyes, she was startled to see dozens of notifications flooding her screen, text messages, social media alerts, and news updates. Sitting upright, she scrolled through them in growing disbelief. The video of the incident had gone viral overnight. Tyler Richards' recording had been shared by a popular social justice account with millions of followers. Hashtags like #FirstClassWhileBlack and #Karen in the Air were trending nationally. Several major news outlets had picked up the story, with headlines ranging from Black teen scientist harassed on flight to DC to military dad defends daughter from racist attack. Colonel Washington entered from the adjoining room already dressed in casual clothes rather than his uniform, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the hotel lobby.
"I see you've discovered we've become unwilling public figures," he said, handing her a cup. "Dad, this is crazy," Jasmine said, still scrolling through her phone. "People are calling me a young hero and saying I showed remarkable restraint. There are even memes about Karen's face when she saw your uniform." Colonel Washington sat on the edge of the bed with a heavy sigh.
I've already received calls from the base public affairs office and my commanding officer. Apparently, they're getting media requests for statements.
"What do we do?" Jasmine asked, feeling overwhelmed. "First, we remember why we're here," her father replied firmly. "You have a competition to focus on. That remains the priority." Jasmine nodded, grateful for her father's grounding perspective. Still, she couldn't help but feel the weight of unexpected attention. "People are going to recognize me at the competition now." Perhaps Colonel Washington acknowledged. "But they'll recognize you as someone who stood her ground with dignity while being wrongfully attacked. That's nothing to be ashamed of." As they prepared to leave for the competition orientation, the hotel manager called their room. "Colonel Washington, there are several reporters in the lobby asking about you and your daughter. We're not confirming you're staying here, but I wanted to warn you." "Thank you for the heads up," Colonel Washington replied. "Is there a service entrance we might use?" Downstairs, a hotel security officer escorted them through a back hallway and helped them into a waiting taxi. As they pulled away from the hotel, Jasmine spotted several news vans parked out front. "This is surreal," she murmured, slumping in her seat. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, the flight attendant. "Just wanted to check on you both. The airline is fully supporting you and has placed Karen on their permanent no-fly list after reviewing all evidence. Stay strong." Meanwhile, across town, Karen Whitfield was experiencing a very different kind of morning. After being detained and questioned at the airport, she had been released pending further investigation with a citation for disorderly conduct. She'd taken an overpriced taxi to her hotel, certain that once she explained her side of the story to her company, they would understand and support her. That confidence had evaporated when she checked her email to find a message from her company's CEO requesting an urgent video call regarding disturbing footage brought to our attention. The call had been brief and devastating. Karen was placed on immediate administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The company's social media accounts were being flooded with outrage, and several major clients had already contacted them expressing concern about continuing their relationship with a company whose executive behaved in such a manner. "But sir, the video doesn't show the whole story," Karen had protested. "That girl was being provocative. They're making this about race when it wasn't." The CEO's expression had remained stone cold. "Karen, you were recorded attempting to physically assault a minor after making racist comments. You did this while identifying yourself as an executive of our company. The damage control alone will cost us millions." Now, sitting alone in her hotel room with the curtains drawn, Karen refreshed news sites, compulsively watching with horror as her name and face spread across the internet. Her phone rang constantly, journalists seeking comment, friends expressing shock, and her increasingly frantic attorney advising her to make no public statements. Back at the National Youth Science Competition, Jasmine was relieved to find that the event organizers had been notified of the situation and had arranged for additional security. The competition director, Dr. Eleanor Rivera, met with Jasmine and Colonel Washington privately before orientation began. "We want to assure you that this competition remains focused on the scientific achievements of our participants," Dr. Rivera said kindly. "We've instructed our staff and judges to treat this as they would any other personal matter that doesn't relate to your research. It will have no bearing on how your work is evaluated." "Thank you," Jasmine replied sincerely. "That's all I want to be judged on my science, not everything else." As she joined the other competitors for orientation, Jasmine felt their curious glances. Some whispered behind their hands, while others approached directly to express support. "I saw what happened to you," said a South Asian girl who introduced herself as Priya. "My mom experiences stuff like that all the time when she travels for business. It's awful that it happened to you, but amazing how you handled it." Throughout the day, Jasmine found unexpected allies. Competition officials ran interference when a reporter somehow gained access to the venue.
Other competitors shared their own experiences with discrimination. One of the judges, a black woman with a distinguished career in environmental science, pulled Jasmine aside briefly. "Focus on your research," she advised quietly. "What happened to you matters, and how you responded matters, but don't let it overshadow what you've accomplished scientifically. Your work on environmental justice deserves its own spotlight." By evening, Jasmine felt both emotionally exhausted and strangely empowered. When she and her father returned to their hotel through the service entrance again, she found an email from a major civil rights organization offering legal support if she decided to pursue a civil case against Karen. "Dad, what should I do about all these offers?" she asked, showing him her phone. "There's even a morning show that wants us both to appear tomorrow." Colonel Washington considered carefully. "These are your decisions to make, Jasmine. But I would suggest waiting until after the competition to engage with any media or legal actions. You've worked too hard to let this distract from your presentation." Jasmine agreed, sending polite responses, thanking everyone for their support, but explaining she needed to focus on the competition for the next few days. Later that night, as she finalized her presentation slides, Jasmine received a notification about a public statement from Meridian Marketing Group, Karen's employer. The statement expressed shock and dismay at their executive's behavior, announced her resignation from the company effective immediately, and committed to mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees. The swift consequences surprised Jasmine. She had expected Karen to face some repercussions, but not such immediate professional fallout. Part of her felt satisfaction that justice had been served so decisively, while another part felt uncomfortable with the public shaming aspect of viral incidents. "It's complicated, isn't it?" Colonel Washington said, noticing her expression as she read the statement. "Yeah," Jasmine admitted. "I wanted her to face consequences for how she treated me, but I never wanted her to lose her job or have her whole life blown up online. It's just a lot." Her father nodded thoughtfully. "Justice and compassion aren't mutually exclusive, Jasmine. You can believe someone should face consequences for their actions while still recognizing their humanity." "I guess I just want something good to come from this," Jasmine said. "Not just punishment, but actual change." "Then perhaps that's what we should focus on," Colonel Washington suggested. "How this experience might be channeled into positive change rather than just outrage and consequences." As she prepared for bed, Jasmine revisited her competition presentation on environmental justice in disadvantaged communities. The incident on the plane had made the issues she was researching feel even more immediate and personal. The connection between various forms of discrimination, whether in exposure to environmental hazards or in who is questioned about belonging in first class, seemed clearer than ever. With newfound determination, she made a few final adjustments to her presentation, emphasizing the human impact of environmental inequality with a passion informed by her own recent experience of injustice. Tomorrow, she would take her place on the competition stage, not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a scientist and advocate with important research to share someone who had earned her place through merit and hard work, regardless of who questioned her right to be there. The morning of Jasmine's presentation dawned bright and clear. She stood at the hotel window watching early sunlight illuminate the Washington Monument in the distance. Despite having prepared meticulously for months, she felt a new wave of nervousness wash over her. "You've got this," Colonel Washington said, joining her at the window. He was dressed in his full-dress uniform today, a deliberate choice they had discussed the night before. Initially, Jasmine had worried his uniform might draw more attention to the incident, but her father had gently suggested that displaying his service openly might help reclaim their narrative. "Being in uniform isn't about intimidation," he had explained. "It's about standing in my truth as someone who has served this country faithfully, supporting my daughter who is pursuing excellence in her own right." Now, as they shared a quiet breakfast in their room, avoiding the public hotel restaurant, Jasmine reviewed her presentation notes one final time. The competition would take place over 2 rounds, preliminary presentations in the morning, with finalists advancing to the afternoon session, where they would present to the full panel of judges and audience. Remember, Colonel Washington said as they prepared to leave regardless of what happens today, I couldn't be prouder of you, not just for your research, but for who you are. Their arrival at the competition venue went more smoothly than anticipated. Competition staff had arranged for competitors to enter through a separate entrance, away from the small group of reporters who had gathered hoping to speak with Jasmine. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with the nervous energy typical of academic competitions, but Jasmine also noticed curious glances and whispered conversations following her as she made her way to the preparation area. She tried to focus on reviewing her notes, but memories of the confrontation with Karen kept intruding, breaking her concentration. "Breathe, Jazz," she whispered to herself, using her mother's technique for managing anxiety. "In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Nervous, asked a voice beside her. It was Priya, the girl who had expressed support yesterday. "Trying not to be," Jasmine admitted. "Want to practice together," Priya offered. "I find it helps to run through presentations with someone else before going on stage." Grateful for the distraction, Jasmine agreed. They took turns presenting sections of their research to each other, offering constructive feedback. Jasmine's project on environmental justice in communities of color had identified alarming patterns in the placement of industrial facilities and their correlation with respiratory illness rates in predominantly Black neighborhoods. North Carolina. "This is really powerful work," Priya commented after Jasmine finished her practice run. "Especially the community engagement component, the way you involved local residents in the data collection process." "That was important to me," Jasmine explained, finding herself relaxing into the familiar territory of her research. Scientific studies often happen to communities rather than with them. By the time her group was called for preliminary presentations, Jasmine felt more centered, more focused on why she was really here. Colonel Washington took his seat in the audience as Jasmine made her way to the presentation area. The preliminary round consisted of 3 judges evaluating 6 competitors. Each student had 10 minutes to present, followed by 5 minutes of questions. Jasmine was scheduled to go fourth, giving her time to observe the others and gauge the judge's questioning style. When her turn came, Jasmine approached the podium with outward calm, despite the flutter in her stomach. She connected her laptop to the projector, straightened her shoulders, and began, "Good morning. My name is Jasmine Washington, and my research addresses environmental racism in industrial zoning and its health impacts on communities of color." For the next 10 minutes, she was completely in her element. The research she had conducted over the past year, the air quality monitoring, the health surveys, the historical zoning analysis, the statistical correlations flowed from her with clarity and conviction. The incident on the plane seemed to fade into the background as she shared her findings with the engaged judges. When she concluded her presentation, the lead judge leaned forward. "Miss Washington, your methodology is impressively rigorous for a high school researcher. Can you elaborate on how you controlled for socioeconomic factors separate from race in your analysis?" Jasmine had anticipated this question and explained the multiple regression analysis she had used, acknowledging the limitations while defending the statistical significance of her findings. The questioning continued, challenging but fair. One judge pressed her on policy recommendations, another on the scientific consensus regarding environmental racism. Jasmine responded thoughtfully to each, neither backing down from her conclusions nor overreaching beyond what her data supported. As she returned to her seat, she caught her father's eye in the audience. His subtle nod told her everything she needed to know. She had done well. During the break, while judges deliberated on which competitors would advance to the finals, Jasmine joined Colonel Washington in the lobby area. Before they could speak, Dr. Rivera approached them with a concerned expression. "Jasmine, Colonel Washington, I wanted to inform you that we've had to ask several journalists to leave the premises. They were attempting to interview other competitors about yesterday's incident, rather than focusing on the scientific content of the competition." "I'm sorry for the disruption," Jasmine said, embarrassed. "It's not your fault," Dr. Rivera assured her. "But I did want to give you a heads up that there's significant media interest in your story. We're doing our best to maintain the academic integrity of the event." As Dr. Rivera walked away, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a news alert. She opened it to find that Karen had released a public statement through her attorney, a carefully worded apology that managed to simultaneously express regret while subtly defending her actions and portraying herself as a victim of cancel culture. "I sincerely apologize if my actions were perceived as discriminatory," the statement read in part. "That was never my intent. As someone who has championed diversity initiatives in my professional life, I'm deeply hurt by the characterization of me as racist based on a momentary misunderstanding during a stressful situation." Jasmine handed the phone to her father, who read the statement with a grim expression. "Non-apology apologies are a specialized art form," he commented dryly. Notice the "if" and the focus on perception rather than her actual behavior. Before they could discuss it further, the announcement came for finalists to prepare for the final round. Jasmine's name was called among the 12 advancing competitors. "Congratulations," Colonel Washington said, embracing his daughter. "Now go show them what environmental justice really means." The final round presentations took place in the main auditorium before all judges, competitors, and attendees. The stakes were higher, the audience larger, and Jasmine found herself facing not just academic evaluation, but the weight of unexpected public attention. As she took the stage for her final presentation, she spotted a few faces she recognized not as scientists or competitors, but as journalists who had somehow gained access. For a moment, anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. Were they here for her science, or just because she had gone viral? Then she saw her father sitting straight-backed in his uniform, his expression communicating complete confidence in her. Behind him sat Priya and several other competitors who had become allies over the past 2 days. And beside them, surprisingly, was Sophia, the flight attendant, who must have come to support her on her day off. Drawing strength from their presence, Jasmine launched into her presentation with renewed purpose. This time she spoke not just as a scientist presenting data, but as someone whose research and personal experience were interconnected parts of the same struggle for justice. Environmental racism isn't just about pollution rates or asthma statistics, she concluded powerfully. It's about who is seen as deserving of clean air, clean water, and safe living conditions. It's about whose concerns are taken seriously and whose are dismissed. My research doesn't just document disparities, it challenges us to recognize them as manifestations of the same systemic biases that affect every aspect of American life. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Even the normally reserved judges seemed moved by the personal conviction behind her scientific presentation. The questioning that followed was rigorous but respectful, and Jasmine handled each query with the confidence of someone who thoroughly understood her subject matter. As the competition concluded and judges retired to deliberate on the final rankings, Jasmine was approached by several fellow competitors seeking to collaborate on future research. A university professor handed her a business card mentioning a summer research program that would be fortunate to have someone with your analytical skills and perspective. Colonel Washington made his way to his daughter's side, pride evident in his expression. "Whatever the results," he said quietly, "you've already won in all the ways that truly matter." Sophia joined them, offering Jasmine an unexpected hug. "I switched shifts to be here today," she explained. "After what happened on that flight, I needed to see you shine in your element. The airline sent me with something for you too." She handed Jasmine an envelope containing a formal letter of apology from the airline's CEO and a voucher for 2 first-class tickets to any destination they served. As they waited for the results, Jasmine reflected on the whirlwind of the past 48 hours, how what should have been simply a journey to an academic competition had become a viral moment in the ongoing conversation about race in Masterus, America. She thought about Karen, whose career and reputation had imploded because of a few minutes of behavior that probably represented her worst self rather than her whole self. She thought about her mother, who had taught her to stand tall in spaces where others might question her belonging. Finally, Dr. Rivera approached the podium to announce the winners. In third place, she declared Daniel Chen for his research on neural network applications in early cancer detection. Applause filled the auditorium as Daniel made his way to the stage. In second place, Dr. Rivera continued Jasmine Washington for her groundbreaking work on environmental racism and community-based research methodologies. The applause seemed even louder as Jasmine walked to the stage, accepting the Crystal Award with a mixture of pride and humility. Second place in a national competition was an extraordinary achievement, one that would open doors to prestigious universities and research opportunities. As she stood on stage beside Daniel, waiting for the first place winner to be announced, Jasmine spotted journalists frantically typing on their phones. Tomorrow's headlines would likely mention both her scientific achievement and the incident that had preceded it. She hoped they would give at least as much attention to her research as to the viral confrontation. And in first place, Dr. Rivera announced Priya Patel for her innovative research on biodegradable alternatives to microplastics. Jasmine applauded genuinely for her new friend, whose work truly was exceptional. As the three winners posed for photographs, Jasmine realized that in many ways this outcome was perfect. Her work had been recognized on its merits, but she hadn't become the center of controversy by winning after going viral. No one could claim her victory was due to sympathy or political correctness rather than scientific excellence. As she rejoined her father with her second-place trophy, Colonel Washington embraced her proudly. "Your mother would be over the moon," he whispered. For the first time since the incident on the plane, Jasmine felt fully herself again. Not a viral video subject, not a victim of discrimination, but a young scientist with important work to do and the determination to do it, regardless of who might question her right to be there. 2 weeks after returning from Washington, D.C., Jasmine sat at the kitchen table with her father, sifting through the stack of university brochures that had arrived in their mailbox. Her second-place finish at the National Youth Science Competition had put her on the radar of top-tier research institutions across the country. MIT, Stanford, Howard, Duke, Colonel Washington read aloud, examining the embossed letterheads. "They're all courting you now." "It's overwhelming," Jasmine admitted, running her finger over the glossy photograph of a state-of-the-art environmental science laboratory at Columbia University. "A month ago, I was just hoping to get into a good state school with some scholarship money." The aftermath of the competition and the viral incident had unfolded in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Jasmine's research on environmental racism had received substantial media attention that might never have come without the controversy that preceded it. Environmental justice organizations had reached out about featuring her work in their advocacy campaigns. 3 scientific journals for young researchers had requested submissions based on her findings. Meanwhile, the airline had formally banned Karen from all future flights. The video had become a case study in corporate training programs about racial bias. Karen herself had largely disappeared from public view after her resignation, though rumors circulated that she was writing a book about cancel culture and her experience of being misrepresented on social media. The legal consequences had been relatively minor. Karen had accepted a plea deal on the disorderly conduct charge, resulting in community service and a fine but no jail time. Jasmine had decided against pursuing a civil lawsuit, feeling that the public consequences Karen had already faced were sufficient. "Any thoughts on which schools you're leaning toward?" Colonel Washington asked, interrupting Jasmine's reflection. "Actually, I've been thinking about Howard," she replied. "Their environmental justice program is amazing, and after everything that happened, I think I'd appreciate being in a space where my presence isn't questioned." Colonel Washington nodded thoughtfully. "That's perfectly understandable, though I hope you know you belong wherever you choose to go." Jasmine smiled. "I know, Dad. You've always made sure of that." Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Colonel Washington rose to answer it, returning moments later with a package. "Special delivery," he said, placing the box in front of Jasmine. "From Sophia." Surprised, Jasmine opened the package to find a framed photograph of herself on stage at the competition, accepting her award. A note was attached. "Thought you might want a reminder of who you really are, a brilliant young scientist changing the world. Your first-class seat in the future is guaranteed. Warmly, Sophia." Jasmine's eyes misted slightly as she propped the frame on the table. The flight attendant had stayed in touch, becoming an unexpected friend and supporter. Colonel Washington cleared his throat. "Speaking of changing the world, there's something I wanted to discuss with you." He slid an official-looking letter across the table. Jasmine scanned it quickly, her eyes widening as she realized what it contained. "A promotion and transfer to the Pentagon," she exclaimed. "Dad, that's incredible!" Colonel Washington nodded, his expression a mix of pride and uncertainty. "It would mean relocating to the D.C. area for my final years of service before retirement. The position involves overseeing environmental compliance for military installations. They specifically cited my support of your research as evidence of my commitment to the issue." "So my work helped you get promoted?" Jasmine asked, delighted by the irony. In a way, he chuckled. "But it would mean moving before your senior year. I wanted to get your thoughts before making any decisions." Jasmine considered this development. Moving would mean leaving her friends and familiar surroundings during her final year of high school, but it would also place her near some of the nation's premier research institutions and environmental advocacy organizations. "I think we should do it," she said finally. "It feels right somehow." Full circle. Colonel Washington raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "The incident that threatened to overshadow my research has instead amplified it. Your career is now aligning with the environmental justice issues I've been studying, and we'll be living near the city where everything changed for us." She smiled. "It feels like transformation rather than disruption." Her father nodded, understanding her perspective. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling out his tablet and navigating to an email. The airline settlement came through. After the incident, the airline had offered a substantial settlement to avoid litigation, acknowledging their failure to adequately protect Jasmine from harassment and attempted assault. "They're asking where to direct the funds," Colonel Washington explained. Jasmine had been thinking about this since they'd first received the settlement offer. "I want to create a scholarship," she said confidently, "for students of color pursuing environmental science and environmental justice research." "I had a feeling you might say that," her father replied with a proud smile. "I've already contacted a foundation that can help us set it up." Later that evening, as Jasmine worked on an outline for an article about her research, she received a text message from Tyler Richards, who had stayed in touch since the incident. "Thought you might want to see this," the message read with a link attached. Jasmine clicked the link to find an article about a new airline industry initiative to implement enhanced anti-discrimination training for all flight personnel developed in direct response to several high-profile incidents, including hers. The program would include specific protocols for handling bias-motivated harassment between passengers. She showed the article to her father, who was reading in his favorite armchair. "Looks like some good is coming from what happened after all," she observed. "Change often comes from uncomfortable moments," Colonel Washington reflected. "From people being forced to confront realities they'd prefer to ignore." Jasmine nodded, thinking about her research findings, how communities had to become visible in their suffering before environmental injustices were addressed. "I'm starting to understand that my scientific work and what happened on that plane aren't separate stories," she said. "They're different expressions of the same fundamental issues. And addressing those issues requires both data and narrative," her father added. "Numbers tell us what's happening, but stories make us care." The next morning, Jasmine received an unexpected email. The subject line read simply, "From Karen Whitfield." Her finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. She opened the message. "Jasmine," it began, "after much reflection and counseling, I've come to recognize the harm my actions caused you. My initial apology was defensive and inadequate. I am truly sorry for how I behaved on that flight, not just for the consequences I faced afterward, but for the hurt and humiliation I inflicted on you, a young woman who had done nothing to deserve such treatment." The email continued, explaining that Karen had begun working with an anti-racism educator and had come to recognize the unconscious biases that had driven her behavior. She didn't ask for forgiveness or redemption, just acknowledged her wrongdoing and the work she was doing to change. Jasmine showed the email to her father, uncertain how to respond or whether to respond at all. "That's your decision," Colonel Washington said after reading it. "You don't owe her a reply, but it might provide closure if you want it." After careful consideration, Jasmine composed a brief, dignified response. She didn't offer absolution, but acknowledged Karen's efforts toward growth and recommended some resources on environmental racism that might further her education. As summer turned to fall, Jasmine and her father prepared for their move to Washington, D.C. The scholarship fund was established already, accumulating donations beyond the initial settlement amount. Jasmine had accepted an invitation to speak at a conference on environmental justice, where she would present an expanded version of her competition research. On their final evening in the house where Jasmine had grown up, where memories of her mother lingered in every corner, she and her father sat on the back porch watching the sunset. Colonel Washington said quietly, "Your mother always believed you would change the world someday. She just didn't specify how many ways you would do it." Jasmine smiled, thinking of the unexpected journey that had brought her here, from a confrontation in first class to national recognition for her environmental justice work. "I think Mom would be proud that I held my ground," she said, "both in my research and on that plane." Without a doubt, her father agreed, his voice warm with certainty. "She always told you to take up the space you've earned." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant orange and gold, Jasmine felt a sense of peace and purpose. The incident that might have diminished her had instead amplified her voice. The research that might have remained in academic obscurity had found a wider audience. And through it all, she had maintained the dignity and determination that her parents had instilled in her from childhood. Tomorrow, they would board another plane first class again, courtesy of the airline vouchers, and begin a new chapter in Washington, D.C. This time, Jasmine would take her seat not with the uncertainty of belonging, but with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and where she was going. "Ready for another first-class flight?" Colonel Washington asked, with a gentle smile. "Absolutely," Jasmine replied. "I've earned my seat." What would you have done if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you have handled things differently? Comment below with your thoughts on how to respond to discrimination in public spaces. Don't forget to like this video. If you found Jasmine's story inspiring, subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming adversity, and share with someone who might benefit from this powerful message of dignity and resilience. Jasmine's journey teaches us that dignity is our most powerful weapon against discrimination. When faced with racism, maintaining composure doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It means refusing to let others define your worth. Colonel Washington's support reminds us that allyship matters. Sometimes, having someone who believes in you makes all the difference. The viral aftermath demonstrates how individual incidents connect to larger systemic issues. Karen faced consequences not because of cancel culture, but because accountability is necessary for real change. However, Jasmine's decision to focus on her research rather than revenge shows true strength of character. Perhaps most importantly, this story illustrates how discrimination in public spaces mirrors broader inequities in society. Jasmine's environmental justice research and her experience on the plane were two sides of the same coin, both about who belongs where and whose concerns matter. By channeling her experience into positive action through the scholarship fund, Jasmine transformed a painful incident into lasting impact. The true measure of victory isn't just standing your ground in the moment, but using that ground to build something better for those who come after you. Did this story resonate with your own experiences or those of someone you know? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in the power of dignity and resilience against discrimination, hit that like button to help spread this message. Subscribe for more stories that illuminate important social issues with depth and nuance. And please share this video with anyone who might need this reminder. You belong in every space you've earned, regardless of who questions your presence there. Thank you for watching, and remember, taking up your rightful space is both a personal victory and a collective one.